Welcome to Sober Mentum Today, where we talk about middle-of-the-road drinking and how trying on an alcohol-free lifestyle might just help you show up as a better version of yourself for your life, your loved ones, and everything that matters to you most. I am your host, Morgan Smith. Today's topic is why your attempts to take a break from drinking have failed, the 4 headwinds that are working against you, and how you can overcome each of them. But before we get started, I'd like to offer you a helpful tool. If you're questioning your drinking, which can be a very healthy thing to do, by the way, or wondering whether you should consider cutting back, you can find out exactly where you stand on the alcohol drinker spectrum. Just click on the link in the description box below, and you can download the free info guide. Now, on to today's topic. Okay, let's get into number 2. Okay, number 2 is your brain's reward center. Okay, and your brain's reward center, it's basically designed to reward healthy and constructive behaviors, experiences, or achievements. Okay, it's sort of part of that wiring in your brain that is basically going to give you a little feeling of reward or satisfaction through the release of certain neurotransmitters, such that you desire to repeat what is generally a constructive, rewarding behavior. Some examples of this could be physical affection, eating a delicious meal, accomplishing something positive, a positive achievement. This could be in academics and sports, in your career. But essentially, this is a part of our brain that's designed for a very healthy and good purpose. And while the purpose of the brain's reward center is perfectly healthy, it gets hijacked when an outside substance, a drug, and in this case we're talking about alcohol, which absolutely is a drug, it's going to hijack that reward process and amp it up to a level that's well above what it is naturally intended to. So let's say, I'm just going to make this up, but for sake of argument, let's say that you eat a meal that's really good and maybe some dessert and whatever, and you sort of have this enjoyment satisfaction level, 4, right? So it's like maybe the brain's reward center can go all the way up to 5, but this was a really great meal that got you up to 4. You put in an outside substance like a drug, and then that's taking you up to like an 8. Or if it's maybe a really powerful drug like crack cocaine or heroin or something like that, it might take you all the way up to a 10. So it's blasting way up past what is naturally and normally intended by your brain's reward center. And it shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody that people can become hooked to these things. And however, there's a very serious set of downsides and consequences that go along with that, as we can all understand. I'm going to put another infographic up on the screen right now that kind of explains the way the brain's reward center functions, both the way it's supposed to, but also then how it is influenced by an outside substance. So you can see here we've got the anatomical depiction of the brain and the different parts of the brain that are involved here. I won't go into all that, but just real quickly, I'm going to read through these 4 bullet points. So when a person takes a drug or engages in other addictive activities, the neurotransmitter dopamine is released in a cluster of nerve cells called the nucleus accumbens, sometimes called the pleasure center of the brain. Okay. The second one is that the hippocampus responds to the dopamine by recording memories of the pleasure, and the amygdala creates a conditioned response to stimuli like a cigarette or needles, meaning that when the person sees these cues, they'll have an intense craving for the substance or activity. Again, we talked about this in the last section on the conscious mind, how triggers can, sort of drive that desire to drink, create a craving. And we discussed it in terms of times of day, places, people, so forth. But it can also be something as small as a sound, right? The sound of a wine bottle cork popping out of the bottle, the sound of a can of beer cracking open, the smell that comes out of that bottle of wine, or that emanates from that can of beer when you crack it open. Just those small sort of sensory items can absolutely be triggers, because this reward center of your brain has picked up on every single cue associated with this habit. Okay, going into number 3, repeated exposure causes nerve cells in the nucleus accumbens and the prefrontal cortex, which is concerned with planning, to communicate in a way that leads the person to seek out the drug or activity and want to do it more. And then lastly, bullet point 4 here is, over time, the person gets used to the feeling of pleasure they get from taking drugs or doing another addictive activity, and so they need to do it more and more to get the same satisfaction and satisfy their cravings. They have a hard time feeling happy when they're not on the drug or doing the activity they're addicted to, because their brain has gotten used to the feeling of pleasure the drug or activity gives it. Okay? So this is sort of in a nutshell what you're working against with your brain's reward center. You have conditioned your brain's reward center to expect alcohol to flow in at a certain cadence, whether that's daily, whether that's several nights a week, or what have you. And you're going to feel probably just a little bit off until you consume that alcohol, because your brain's neurochemistry has adjusted itself to the expectation that that's going to happen. And it has adjusted the output of certain neurotransmitters, toggled some up, some down, and it has sort of gotten itself ready for this to come in. The brain is a highly adaptive organism. So before we get into exactly how you can overcome your brain's reward center and how it's been previously conditioned to want and expect and ask for alcohol, I want to make a quick digression here. And that is, now that we've sort of established exactly how the brain's reward center operates, its healthy function in a non-drug or non-chemical sort of associated way, I wanted to just say that on this issue, there can be sometimes feelings of shame or embarrassment that, why did this happen to me? And sometimes people don't even want to take action because it's sort of humiliating to admit that I've become overly fond of drinking. Or if you want to use the word addiction, I often avoid using the word addiction simply because it's such an emotionally charged word with a whole lot of baggage around it. But some of the most popular forms of dealing with substance abuse ascribe the word disease to this phenomenon. And what I think we need to just have a candid discussion about is your brain's reward center is doing its job, okay? Becoming addicted to an addictive substance, that's not really a disease. I mean, you become addicted to something that's addictive because your brain's reward center is recognizing that, hey, this thing feels good. Let's do it again. That's totally normal and natural, okay? And there are some chemicals and substances that are far more addictive than alcohol. Alcohol does not have the same hijacking effect on dopamine expression that some other drugs do, like cocaine, for example. So very often it takes a lot longer and a lot more repetition and, in some cases, many, many years or decades before people really realize that this thing has taken root. But I just want to assure you that if you've ever felt any feelings of shame about this, if you've ever felt like there's something wrong with you because you became overly fond of alcohol, more so than maybe some other people, I'm just here to tell you, don't feel embarrassed or ashamed. You're in great company. And I wrestled with this myself, didn't want to admit it to myself, let alone anybody else. And I think this holds a lot of people back and keeps them stuck. But you have nothing to be ashamed of. And by the way, there's millions and millions of people in this world who have a low-level psychological and or physiological dependence on alcohol. Again, if you want to call it addiction, fine. That will just operate in plain sight. And no one will ever question them. And the reason is because alcohol is not just socially acceptable, but socially celebrated in so many corners and cultures in our world that it's just, you can just live your life with this dependence and nobody will ever say anything to you. So I just wanted to make that quick digression. So now let's talk about how you win in this situation when it comes to your brain's reward center. Okay? Well, there's only one way to do it, and that's to starve it out. You've got to remove the alcohol, and you've got to do so on a consistent basis such that it has the opportunity to recalibrate. Okay? Your brain, your neurochemistry has a chance to say, okay, I guess this stuff isn't coming in anymore. We need to go back and retool so that this person doesn't feel out of whack without the alcohol coming in. I'll give you a quick analogy to caffeine. If you've ever taken a break from caffeine, if you're someone who drinks your fair share of coffee, for example, I'm certainly one who does. I've never really tried to take a break from my coffee habit, but on the rare occasion that I have to maybe abstain for maybe a medical appointment early in the morning or something, I always feel out of sorts and really just, not right. And that's because people who drink a lot of coffee early in the morning, their brain essentially downregulates the release of stimulants and excitatory neurotransmitters in the expectation that this external source, this external stimulant is going to come in instead. Because your brain seeks homeostasis, it seeks balance. And it doesn't want to get too high, it doesn't want to get too low. So it knows that in this case, caffeine is going to roll in at this certain time, and so therefore it's going to adjust. Well, with alcohol, you remove the alcohol from the equation, and after a period of days, your brain is going to figure out, okay, this isn't happening anymore, we need to recalibrate. And this is great news. And this process of recalibration, the medical term for it is neuroplasticity. Okay, and I'm going to put another infographic on the screen here where we can review this concept of neuroplasticity. But it's the ability of your brain to reorganize itself, both in structure and how it functions. Now, as we discussed earlier when we were talking about the mind shift that needs to happen in order for your break from drinking to stick, we talked about how you've already had one mind shift toward drinking. Well, this concept of neuroplasticity, you've already sort of experienced the principles and this phenomenon of neuroplasticity in a pro-alcohol context, meaning your brain has adapted itself, because it's an amazingly powerful adaptation engine. It has adapted itself to your drinking habit, okay, the quantity and the frequency that you consume. So in looking again at the infographic, how the brain changes, well, there's 4 different areas here that are affected. First is neurogenesis. Okay, this is the continuous generation of new neurons in certain brain regions. Okay, then also new synapses. Okay, new skills and experiences create new neural connections. And in this case, those new skills and experiences would be experiencing life and all of its events and situations and times of the day and the week and the year without alcohol. Okay, you're literally learning almost like a new language. Okay, the language of sobriety. You're learning this new way of living, and so new synapses will form as a part of that process. Okay, also strengthened synapses. Through repetition and practice, you're strengthening those neural connections. You were strengthening neural connections in favor of your drinking habit, and you're now simply doing the reverse. You're also weakening synapses. Connections in the brain that aren't used become weak. Okay, so as you embrace sobriety during this period of time off from your drinking habit, those older connections are going to sort of slowly dry up and fade away. And they're never going to be completely gone. Okay, it's like you're saving new information on the hard drive over the old information. Okay, but the point is, you will sort of create these new pathways, create this recalibration in your brain, and sort of rebalance things back to a natural state in your brain's reward center. This can take some time. It can often be a matter of weeks, depending on how much you're drinking and how often you're drinking. Okay, you just may feel a little out of sorts in the very beginning. One of the people I work with, I'll never forget, some time back, I was talking about how, you're going to feel better. Just trust me, you're going to feel better. in the long run when you remove the alcohol. And they told me, honestly, Morgan, I don't feel better when I stop drinking. I actually feel worse. And in the very beginning, to some degree, that can be true, and that's very much an explanation of why this driver, the brain's reward center, and feeling out of sorts without the drinking coming in, can cause people to slip back. You just got to power through it because it won't last very long. That's the beauty. You might have some insomnia in the beginning. That's a very common side effect. Feeling a little out of sorts, maybe a little bit of anxiety. Work through it. I promise you it'll get better. And the one way that you will completely sabotage this neuroplasticity process is by going a week without drinking and then slipping back and drinking, and then trying to go another week without drinking and then drinking for 2 or 3 more days, and then going back. I call that the hokey pokey. Okay, 1 foot in drinking, 1 foot out. I did it for years, and quite frankly, it just sucks. Because you are giving your mind, your psychology, your conscious mind, your subconscious mind, and your brain's reward center all kinds of just mixed signals, and it doesn't know which end is up. So it's just going to go back to what it knows, which is drinking. It's going to always tug you back to that. So consistency here is absolutely paramount importance. But you can stay on that path in short order, in a matter of weeks, probably a month tops. At least this element, your brain's reward center, you can largely sideline it from the equation as a headwind. Okay? And that will take us on into the third and probably the most challenging of all of these 4 headwinds that we're talking about. And that's your subconscious mind.